ZoomerLife. Health, wellness, and longevity from the world's brightest minds.
You won't find our next speaker in your program book. I trust you all have program books. He's an old pal of all our conferences. He's another polymath doctor who's also a deep-sea diver, an explorer, and a student of human motivation and leadership. He is Dr. Joe MacInnis. Hey, Joe.
Thank you, Moses, and thank you for that kind introduction, and thank you for inviting me here to experiment with an idea. I've never given this presentation before. The idea I'd like to explore for the next few moments is the dynamic relationship between extreme stress events and leadership. Now, everyone in this audience has been through their share of extreme stress events. You lost your job. Good friend was hurt badly in a car accident. Your best friend's marriage broke up. And as you were dealing with this stress, you looked around and you saw that your family and your friends were also struggling with how to deal with the fact that they were diminished, that they were heartsick. When we are confronted with an extreme stress event, we need two things. We need a resilient response, and we need to be able to inform, influence, encourage those who are around us. We need the wisdom of leadership. Now, leadership is nothing more, and you know this because you are all leaders. It is nothing more or less than the ability to inform, to influence, to persuade, to encourage other people to solve a community problem. And as parents and teachers and coaches and managers, you use this essential social skill every single day. You know that no complex task, especially the tough ones, succeed without it. A few months ago, I found myself in a situation of extreme stress. And I found myself struggling with my leadership components. And I'd like to share that story with you. Early this year, I was on this ship in the Western Pacific working with James Cameron on his Deep Sea Challenge expedition. I was the team journalist and the team physician responsible for the health and safety of some 30 people who had come together to help Jim build and operate the sub. Our objective was quite simple: to take this new sub and to dive it deeper and deeper, and then make a dive into the Mariana Trench, the deepest place on the planet, 7 miles from the surface to the seafloor. And I have to tell you, after 60 days, we managed to do this. Jim Cameron climbed into the sub that he had built, flew to the bottom, spent 3 hours exploring Earth's final frontier. I also have to tell you that it was the most difficult, in 50 years of going to sea, the most difficult, challenging mission that I had ever been on. We were in the Western Pacific with a new and untested team and a new and untested sub. The Western Pacific is a place of big waves and big winds. Beneath the surface are freezing temperatures, unknown currents, and steel-bending pressures. We had injuries from heaving decks, slippery stairwells, cables under tension, motion sickness. And over those 60 days, we treated strained back, crushed ribs, twisted ankles, lacerated arms. I got to tell you, as I said, it was 60 days of deep-sea guerrilla warfare. Our first dives were conducted in a wave-protected bay south of Sydney, Australia. We made a dive to 60 feet. It was successful. Jim spent 2 hours on the bottom in his new sub. Things seemed to be going well. National Geographic just signed on as a sponsor, so we're beginning to build our conference. This is very early in the expedition. And as we were preparing for our second dive, the unthinkable happened. A helicopter carrying two of our teammates crashed and burned. And Mike Degree and Andrew White were killed in the accident. Mike was the leader of our undersea film team. Andrew was the head of our film production team. And we were shattered. The air was so filled with sadness that it was difficult to breathe. It was especially hard for Jim. This was Jim's expedition. And we were early on in the expedition. I saw a man that was so stricken by this, these were his best friends, that he could hardly talk. And I have to tell you that these were my good friends, Andrew and Mike. I had gone to sea with them for years. We had worked on big projects together. And I knew their families, their friends. So for all of us, this was an event like a blade in the heart. I looked around the ship and I saw my colleagues and teammates struggling with what had happened. And I decided that I needed to reach somehow into my leadership toolbox and come up with something. Now, fortunately, I've been going to sea for some 20 years, working with leaders in lethal environments, and I've studied the subject. I'm fascinated with it, how these people in high-risk environments, how they become leaders and how they maintain that. I've been mentored by good people, scientists who have taken me down to study the Titanic. I've also been mentored by people like Dr. Dave Williams, some of whom I'm sure in this audience know Dave. He and his colleagues built the International Space Station. And I've also been mentored by a trip that I took with the Canadian Forces to Afghanistan, leadership in lethal environments. And I fortunately have put this together in a book. This was before the expedition, so I had something to draw on. And these are the traits that I have discovered in leaders in lethal environments. There's 12 of them, and you can look down them quickly. The one I was interested in, I thought was most appropriate for this moment, was one I call high empathy communication, responding to the unspoken needs of colleagues and friends. And so this is what I did. After the accident, I went around to everybody on the ship, and I talked to them. I listened to their concerns. Mostly, I listened to them, gave them the value of presence, just listening to them, trying to help them form the words that they would have to say to their wives and to their families. I spent a lot of time with Jim. As I said, he was shattered. These were his best friends. He, at one point, was thinking of canceling the expedition. And I said, Jim, no, we've got to think a little bit differently about this. We have to keep moving ahead to honor Mike and Andrew. And so we did. Those were the most difficult days I think I've ever had at sea on a ship. I focused on what I call soul-whispering empathy, just trying to understand what it was like to be these folks who were struggling with this. And also a thing that I call random and excessive acts of kindness, bringing them coffee, just being there when they needed something, taking their tools from them and carrying it. So just being there to help out. The 30 men and women on this extraordinary cruise were just ordinary people, most of them in their 20s and their 30s. Their specialty was electronic and mechanical engineering, but some of them had never been to sea before. They were not familiar with the forces of the ocean. And they had a time, for those 60 days after the accident, they struggled every day with failures, technical breakdowns. They didn't get enough sleep, so there was this kind of fierce fatigue. There was always the fear of failure in this technology. So again, spending time with them, trying to anticipate their needs, telling them, as our last speaker said, when to get rest, when to exercise, to eat the right food, the kind of thing that you kind of forget when you're in an extreme stress moment. I have to tell you that I was so impressed with Cameron and his crew. They did not push away the negative experiences. In fact, they pulled them in tight. They examined them very, very closely. They kept their composure, and they kept moving forward. They realized that today's high-stress event was a kind of exercise and practice for the one that surely would come tomorrow. In other words, they leveraged their stress into the wisdom of leadership. Everyone in this room is going to encounter more extreme stress events. And this is the list I showed you earlier of some of the leadership traits that I have come up with. You, I suggest, could come up with your own. Make a list of 4 or 5 of your leadership traits. Ask yourself which ones are strong, which ones need shoring up. Find yourself a mentor who could come to you and say, look, here's what you should do to make yourself a better leader. In studying other leaders, this is the list I have come up with, how they have become so good at what they do. Now, you are all leaders. That's why you're here at this conference, to get information that you can take back and share with other people. So again, make your own list. This just happens to be mine for leaders in lethal environments. And ask yourself, which steps should I take to become a better leader for that future extreme stress event? My message to you is very simple. It's as old as the ocean. As you heard from the speaker before me, it's not the extreme stress event that is the challenge. It's our response. It's how we respond to it that's important. We need to bring it in tight, examine it closely, move ahead with calmness, but keep moving ahead. We need, as I said earlier, 2 things in an extreme stress event. We need a clear, resilient response, and we need to be able to inform, influence, encourage, even inspire our family and friends. The beauty of extreme stress events is that they enhance the wisdom of our leadership. It's been a pleasure speaking to you.
Joe wasn't on the agenda in any sense of having been planned for, but he called, let me know he was in town, and I decided to seize the opportunity. I have a somewhat different theory, though, on stress, Joe, in that we've got the stress that you can't do anything about, where you're locked into a situation for which there doesn't appear to be a solution. But isn't there a form of stress that's good that we call challenge, right? And in my life, the most stressed people I know are the ones who don't have good stress in their life. They don't have the challenge. They say to me, oh, life is passing me by, you know.
Well,
I don't have anything to put my strength
We need it. No,
against.
that's a different kind of stress. And a friend of mine some years ago wrote a fabulous book called The Joy of Stress, Peter Hansen, I don't know. And that's the day-to-day stress, and we really do need that.
Isn't the body a muscle in every sense? It needs the resistance.
We need it intellectually, we need it. It's just a question of controlling that stress. Not too many of us get over the top. And I overstress myself, I'm sure you do too, because alpha leaders tend to do that. So it's a question of gauging your own stress, knowing when to use it and when to get away from it, because it can be... But extreme stress events, they are the ones that sometimes just shatter us. And that's an area I'm fascinated with.
Joe,
thanks for inviting me.
Thank you for dropping by.
Thank you.